Okay, so here we are at week 3 already, and this is based really on the book that we're reading by Sousa, and he talks about how spoken language is developed and how important really it is for the building blocks of everything else we learn. So almost everyone learns to speak if they've got a model in front of them, and there's a window for that within the first 3 years of development. Some languages have as many as 15 or as few as 15 phonemes, and English has one of the most, which with 40. But there's a lot of variances between languages with pitch and tone and phonemes, so lots of variations. And it's important if you want your kid to speak 2 languages, if they hear those 2 languages or 3 languages within the first couple of years of their life, if you want them to be able to distinguish those tones and those sounds like a native. That means speaking without an accent. I mean, you can still learn a language later on in life, but if you want to speak it without an accent, without any kind of special instruction from a speech teacher, you'd have to do it within those first couple of years of life. I thought it was really important that he said that toddlers need human interaction to attach meaning to words. And, you see all those commercials on TV where they talk about, sing, act, and play with your kid. And it's such an important thing that parents need to understand, that if they can't just be in front of a TV or learn it from a computer. And that they've found that habitual TV watching or video watching can delay language development in young children by almost 18 months. So that's a huge difference between kids and what they can learn, especially when we've got that 3-year kind of window to learn spoken language. But what was very important is that the development of spoken language is really, really crucial to how we learn reading and how we learn math. So if we can build up kids' spoken language in those first really primary years, we can develop the other things a little bit better too. So it talks about teaching reading, that you've got to have that spoken language component first before you can really teach to learn to read. And that really learning to read is a new human development. And really 100 years ago, we didn't expect everyone to read. Even 50 years ago, we didn't expect everyone to read. Now we do. And it's not as easy a skill as we think it is sometimes for those of us that were fluent readers very easily. I thought it was very interesting. They said 50% of the kids can learn it with formal education with relative ease, but then there's another group of kids that it's really, really difficult for. Being the parent of 2 children that are dyslexic, I can tell you how hard that was for them to learn. There are 3 parts of the brain that work together that requires reading to, you've got to have all 3 of these processes working together and kind of instantaneously for reading to happen fluently. And it's way faster than anybody ever thought it was. And for a long time, they thought it was really just visual and auditory processing, and that frontal lobe interpretation is kind of a newer finding when we talk about reading. And I think everybody knows this. Early literacy programs, especially in areas with high poverty, are essential, because when kids come from high poverty, a lot of times they don't have a lot of spoken language in their house, or at least the vocabulary words that are as many vocabulary words as they would as in a house in middle class or in wealth. And so getting early literacy programs for kids are essential to our kids that need it. So if we're working with a kid who's dyslexic, one of the things that we would need to do is create a print-rich environment. So, labeling everything, making sure there's a lot of text around the child. Teaching reading is a whole sensory approach, so having kids, when they're learning their letters, form them out of Play-Doh, write them in Jello, just all different ways to get the brain kind of working together, to get the sound and the visual and the tactile working together. A love of story, no matter what. Even though reading is hard, you still want to develop that love of reading and that love of story, so that even though it's tough to read, they still want to. You want to emphasize comprehension over other things so that they understand what they're reading, because it's going to take them longer to read. And as they're stumbling over words and having a hard time, developing that comprehension and multiple methods for developing comprehension is really going to be important for them. Teachers should allow audiobooks and text-to-speech tools in their classroom for kids that are really struggling. Um, it's okay to have that kid listen to the book on audio and follow along as they read, and read it multiple times, not just one time, but have a kid read the same book over and over again, because it really builds their vocabulary and their fluency, which is a dyslexic child needs to do. This is something I used to do for kids in my classroom, is I would tell them the night before, I'm going to have you read this paragraph when we come to it in class, and I'm going to let you practice that at home so you can practice it, and when I call on you, you know what I'm going to call on you for. You're not so worried during the whole time that we're reading in class that I'm going to call on you and you're not paying attention, and you've had time to practice it. Because dyslexic kids, what they see on the page is sometimes not what they comes out of their mouth, and it can be very embarrassing, especially for older children. So if you will do that for kids, that would be fabulous. And then there's a little bit of research about using font, different kind of font. So I gave you the difference between Arial and Times New Roman. And if I just Arial, see how there's no extra kind of ending. See on Times there's like this little dip on the T, or there's like this little kind of I don't know, base on the M. That makes it harder for dyslexic kids to read. So you want to use an Arial font. It's called sans serif font. So nothing that has that little extra little kind of font, little ink on the edge. Just a really clear way to do the font. And it's better for kids that are dyslexic, because that idea of a shape being a different letter when it's turned a different way is really, really tough for them. It's a hard thing for them to learn. And since we're in technology, one of the ways that we could use technology to teach reading, letter recognition and word recognition, very easy to use technology to do that. Rhyming patterns, text analysis, as you've got technology and you can take PDFs and you can annotate on them, it really makes it very easy to give kids multiple different articles that they can analyze together. Develop their vocabulary. If you have them really, get into it and do word maps and concept maps, developing infographics on the computer, really super easy and makes them really nice. And having them practice their fluency through podcasting is a really nice way for kids to see their progress in reading and hear themselves read. So some ways that you can use that for. So we talked about math, and a lot of people struggle with math, but we have an innate sense of number sense. And he talked about how you really had to know how many animals were out there, kind of just based on your survival of could you really actually go out in that herd and kill something, or were there too many in that herd that might kill you? So there's also been research on animals that even birds can count to about 3. So that idea that people struggle with math and I'm just not a math person, actually there's a kind of a built-in math sense for us. That kids learn math as young as 6 months old. So they're counting, they're learning 1, or they're learning to kind of count objects in their head. So, but also, just like reading, strong language skills help the learning of math. And for our preschool and our primary teachers, the ability to count objects and classify objects over and over and over and over again is really important for little kids. That one-to-one correspondence, they don't develop until 4 or 5, but they have to have multiple opportunities to count things. At all levels, teachers should be using manipulatives and visual representations, and that's not just for our primary kids. I know we get up in the upper grades and we think, oh, they don't need that anymore. There's no reason to do that. That's for babies. But to really learn math and to learn concepts, you really have to have that. And then, developing concepts, not just procedures. If you're teaching kids, just memorize this. Just when you're multiplying fractions, just flip the second, or when you're dividing fractions, just flip the second and multiply. If you can teach them why, they can forget that. And then later on, they're like, is it the first one I flip? Is it the second one I flip? Which one do I flip? And they can't remember, and they have no idea why they're doing something. So don't teach them mnemonics. Teach them concepts so they really understand what they're doing. And then as kids move into the abstract, about 6th grade, 7th grade, they start moving into the really abstract mathematical concepts. It's important that teachers also teach reasoning skills, because some kids never move from that concrete stage. It's just a developmental thing, and you've got to really help them move It's not like you just automatically at 12 start moving to the abstract. It's something that you can develop with reasoning skills. So making sure that we focus on that. So if a child has dyscalculia, which is, it could either be acquired or developmental, it's the ability to, they can't count, they can't keep numbers in their head, they can't, just numbers are really, really tough for them. So always allow for the use of manipulatives all the time. And sometimes you'll even let them, as they get older, use a multiplication chart or use a division chart. They're probably going to need that. They cannot rely on mnemonics because they're not going to remember them. Dyscalculia has to do with having a really bad long-term memory. It doesn't get into their long-term memory for a long time. So a mnemonic device is not going to help. You have to build their number sense, not just with ones, because they get a heavy reliance on ones, but with twos, fives, tens, hundreds, and working in patterns all the time. When a kid makes a mistake, just don't say that's wrong, but why was this mistake made, and really make them think about how they made the mistake. And then you're going to, just like with the dyslexic kid, you're going to repeat, 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 repeat. I spent hours and hours and hours reading with my son who was dyslexic. Who now, I mean, he's graduated from college, he owns his own business, he's fine now, but boy, learning how to read in first and second grade, that was a tough time. Didn't think we are going to make it some days. So then how do we use mathematics or technology to teach mathematics? Well, it's a fabulous tool for practicing fluency. Instead of doing flashcards at home, there's so many fun games that they can play. They don't even know they're practicing fluency, and they just build up that fluency. There's virtual manipulatives from a lot of places that you can use, not only on a computer, but also on a smartboard that are really nice. Geographic modeling, keeping a math journal. You know, lots of times we do it on paper and pencil, but we can also do that with technology. Creating videos for kids so they can go back at home and watch them, how you solved a math problem, kind of in that flipped classroom. It's great support for kids because math is something they'll get home like, I don't remember how to do this. So if you do a video support for them or even have them create videos is great. And then really great for formative assessment, seeing what kids know immediately and giving you the feedback on what you need to do small groups for. So you've got your reading, you've got your assignment this week. If you have any questions, give me a call or text me, and I'll see you online.